Welcome to the Notes to My Legal Self, AI Insights, where law and AI collide. Get ready to level up your legal game with us. We've got career advice, cutting-edge developments, mind-blowing legal tech, and more. Know someone making waves in the legal AI world? Nominate them, or even nominate yourself. We love courageous souls. And don't forget, we want to hear from you too. Ask questions, drop comments. Let's build a community of legal superheroes. But here's the deal. We're all about to have a blast. AI may be serious, but we're here to make it fun. So buckle up, get ready to power up, and let's embark on this exciting journey together. Now, let's introduce your fearless host, Olga Mack. Get ready to dive into the awesomeness of Notes to My Legal Self, AI Insights. Let's go.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Notes to My Legal Self, AI Insights. Today we're going to have a conversation of how to build in the age of AI. I am really excited to have it with Horace, who I've known for a long, long time and never actually had him on the show. So Horace, welcome. Please introduce yourself for folks who haven't met you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Olga. Hello, everyone. For those who haven't met me, my name is Horace Wu. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Cynthia. We do contract data analytics and smart drafting, essentially turning knowledge into something that's usable by lawyers. So really excited to be here, really excited to be talking to you and sharing stories.
I love that. Look forward to conversation about building. And before we go into deep end, let's talk about how did you get up in the morning and decide to start and lead Cynthia?
Okay, so there's two different versions of the story. One is the version I tell people in a serious setting, which is I really love what I do, etc., etc. And all of that's true. But the way I got into it was actually pure accident. I was working at a law firm way back when at DLA, and I decided to take a year off because I wanted to try something different before embarking on something a lot more serious, like a partnership. And during my year off, I was experimenting with this consumer-facing app, trying to run a business for that. Pretty good for my first attempt. Got crushed by Facebook and Google and was going to go back to the law firm when this was 2017. We kind of accidentally discovered, hey, there's this thing that works really well for language, and it's this thing called a language model, or rather back then, transformers for picking up language. And I started working with this German NLP company and discovered use cases and thought there's something going on here. So rather than going back to the law firm, I stayed out and have been on this journey of discovering use cases for lawyers and law firms and building really cool stuff. So my drive for all of this is creating really useful and impactful things. I know impactful is not a real word, but I'm going to use it anyway.
I think it is a real word. It's totally a real word when you build.
We're going to pretend.
And you said there is a second version of this story. What is the second version?
The second version of the story is if I don't want to tell like the whole background of like the 2017 thing, and it ties into like the company mission, which we've been thinking a lot about. And that's why we're here. And it's about harvesting knowledge and repurposing knowledge for lawyers. Like inside of law firms, like everybody's biggest pain point is we know what we're supposed to do, but we want it to be backed up by real information, because when you're negotiating, when you're drafting, that real grounded data point is critical between success and failure. Because the worst thing you can do is to go, hey, I think it's this, and you turn out to be wrong. And so like the mission of what we're doing is to make transactional lawyers more effective. And that's the version of the story. Yes, it's true, but it's not how the company started. The company started because I wanted to create things, and it only later became I want to create things for transactional lawyer because I was a transactional lawyer, therefore it all tied back together. But it was kind of a later revelation to me.
I love that. So let's talk about things of substance. Let's talk about why build, why buy, why blend the two.
It's interesting because in the last 18 months, as everybody kind of has noticed, large language models have gone from this like background technology that a few of us in the industry are working on to now everybody is working with large language models, and effectively like all the firms out there questioning, do we want Gen AI? Do we want something else? How do we adopt it? How do we use it? How do we maximize its impact? And the conversation comes up a lot, and it's sort of like carried through from the old days. Do we build? Do we buy? Do we blend the two? And really the answer in the Gen AI space is no different to what it was beforehand. And that is, you buy some, you build some, depending on what you need. And it's so use case driven. And I think like the hype around Gen AI has made some people forget the fundamental truth, which is it depends on your pain point. It depends on what you want to solve.
Yeah, that's I actually want to talk a little bit more about so builder, buy, or partner. That's usually kind of the decision you make, independent of where you are. And a lot of folks have tried to build their apps, and then eventually, what we've seen in the universe is very few people want to build. They really want to partner because it actually or buy because it just makes sense not to do the upkeep. It's a lot of work to run things
Yeah.
and run them well and make sure that they keep up with time. In this world of Gen AI, how do you make this decision? What are sort of practical steps as you go through sort of build, buy, or partner conversations?
Yeah. So I come from the perspective of where we work with law firms. So we are one of those people that sell stuff to law firms. But behind the scenes, and we don't really talk about it publicly, is we partner with a couple of law firms as development partners. So we're actually exploring use cases with them, building things with them. And that's kind of how we came up with most of our products. And it's in this process we kind of see a few repeated patterns where in the Gen AI space, and I think this is an important ground setting point, in the Gen AI space, there are so many open source libraries for working with language models. Things like LangChain, Llama Index, all that stuff makes it so easy to get started. You just need maybe like a weekend of learning Python and then like one morning of reading some notes, and you've got your own large language model that can talk to a PDF. So building something is now really easy for law firms for experimentation purposes. But what we've seen is there's a difference between MVP style building that prototype, versus building something that's production, that's going to go across the entire law firm and serve thousands of customers and thousands of users. And it's kind of like this idea of, I think now the build versus buy, because the lift for building is so much smaller, more people are experimenting and trying it until they hit that barrier of, oh crap, how do we like scale this to millions of documents and thousands of users? And this is where like the partnering and the buying starts making more sense. It's not the starting from zero. It's not the 0 to 1 that's hard. It's the 1 to 100 that's hard. And
That's
I think,
that's an
yeah,
interesting perspective, we kind of seen this with Web 2. Let's just call it that.
yep, yep,
We've seen a lot of sort of it just like having industrial grade security and really scaling and make sure that it maintains itself. It actually is not a small thing. There are businesses built around it to make sure that it withstands the test of time. And I think what you're describing is this classic relationship with the design partner. You have a law firm or any company that comes to you. In the past, they would come to you completely oblivious, but in age of Gen AI, where they can put something together over the weekend, they already test drove something and got their imagination going, which is good. That actually makes it for a more productive conversation right away. But I actually want to focus on this idea of design partnership because it's a very important relationship. That's a mission critical marriage. This is where you and your partner are tied together and you're trying to go further together, and you may have sort of a cultural divide and different incentives and all kinds of stuff. How do you think about this design partnership? What is the sort of three critical elements of making it successful?
I'll speak about it from the perspective of a vendor, of the kind of sell side of the design partnership. When we think about law firms who would be a good design partner, we think about a few factors. Do they have like the expertise to bring to the table? Have they identified a problem that's really worth our getting together and solving. That's kind of element number one. Element number two is, will they have the continued commitment to work on this? Because it's an iterative process. We're not going to be able to build something in the first version and go, solve the problem. That almost never happens. And the third factor is really like, do we get on well? Is there kind of an alignment in the vision? So all of those things kind of come together in deciding, are we going to be able to work together to solve this problem? And ultimately, it always starts with, there is a problem to be solved. And the discovery process could be done by the law firm by themselves. It could be done by us and then brought to a law firm. But the best one is if we're already talking to someone, maybe over a coffee, maybe just at a conference, and it's like, hey, there's something here. Let's explore this together. That's where I found the most fruitful relationships, where people are like, we are both in this and we want to build something together. So the partnership tend to evolve organically. It's hard to force it. It's hard to it's like a marriage. You can't really force it. Well,
remember what Genius said? I can't force people to fall in love with you. I can do a lot of things, but can't force love. You can't force love.
That's a design partnership.
Yeah, I actually want to talk a little bit more about it. So I think I've had many design partnership conversations, and I think at some point you have to explain the difference between a dev shop and design partnership. And that big difference is that whatever you build will be brought to others, prospectively to your competitors. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, because that means there's going to be revenue to build it better, safer, cheaper, scale it, change industry standards. But sometimes, depending on the enlightenment of the other side, that is a difficult conversation. I'm curious, how do you navigate this educational process?
I think I've been very lucky in that I haven't really had to educate our design partners. I think they all see the merit of, okay, we're building something together, and yes, it can go to competitors, but you know what? It's never going to be as tailored to the competitors as it is going to be for the design partner, because we are solving their use case with their flavor to their workflow. So I'll talk about a concrete example, which kind of happened over the last 18 months. We've been working with an law firm, and they kind of came to us first because they saw our super comparer product, which is able to grab any two documents and compare the provisions by rearranging them. And their funds partner, their private funds partner, was like, hey, this is really, really great. You're helping me kind of get a view of the market. But what I really want is, I don't want an X and Y two-dimensional grid in an Excel spreadsheet of all of my provisions that are compared. That's useless to me. I can't send that to a client. What I want is, I want to collapse it down so I can get a compendium of side letters that can go out to a client. They can use it for MFN election. They can do this with it. And that's a sort of like, we've already got the basis. We've already done the hard work of building the technology. Now it's about creating an output, creating the workflows around the output that would tailor to that practice team. And so like, they had an understanding of, yes, they're not the only ones with this problem, but they want this workflow to be tailored for them. Now, another firm would get there and they'll find 90% of it useful, but then it's not going to be 100%. And because it's tailored, because they're the first one to have this tool, they have that edge. And it's hard to get a dev shop to do this, because a dev shop doesn't necessarily have the domain expertise, and also they probably haven't done the groundworks to get the components working in the first place. And so I think for that law firm, there was a benefit of, like, we're going to be getting this sooner than anyone else. We're going to be getting this that fits exactly what we need. And other law firms can pick it up, but they're probably not going to be as tailored as that first customer that we made it for. So definitely forward thinking, but there are benefits to dev partner, and the learning that occurs while we're going through the building process is a feedback loop. They improve and we improve, because they can change their workflows as it is augmented by the technology as well. So yeah, very much a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, well, and the dev shop does not have a structure or incentive to keep on improving it. and making it better. I think that's really
Yes.
sort of the big takeaway here, because starting something is relatively easy. Even building version 2 and 3 is fairly easy. But then at some point when it becomes complicated, you need resources to keep it going, and it really should be shared model. Um, let's talk about, I think I find it very important to agree on definition of success with your
Yeah.
prospective partners. Like, what does success look to you? And I find it important to agree before you start, because then you can say, look, this is, we are here today, we're trying to get here, this is our progress. Look, we got here, that's success. We agree that this is success.
Mm.
And I find it very important to have that conversation before you even start, because otherwise it's going to be a moving target that you never reach. So I'm curious, how do you get to the definition of success with your prospective design partners to make sure there's sort of the beginning and the end to that sort of journey of getting to a product?
You've hit a sore spot. And it's because it's really hard. It's really hard to define what is success when you're building something brand new. We tried a few ways. One way is to go, hey, here is the design, here's the wireframe. When we get to this with these functions, it's done. It's success. You've got version 1. And what we found is, as you release version 1, people are like, oh, but this feature will be really nice and that feature will be really nice. So then they go, how about we get to version 2 before we go to production? And that becomes a moving target. Now, I don't think that can ever be kind of like controlled. People will always want more because they get more ideas as they see something get closer to fruition. So for us, we try to get milestones. We try to say, look, it's not like there's an endpoint. And to your point earlier about dev shop versus development partner, you're right. We don't disappear after we've done the job. We keep on building, we keep on improving. But that's precisely kind of linked to the milestone idea of like, we're going to get you this, then we're going to get you this, then we're going to get you this. And we collaborate to decide what features are most important and will have the highest value for a dev partner. So we have monthly calls, and with one dev partner in particular, we have weekly calls, and we're like, what about this? What about that? So very much like, we benefit as a company by knowing what the industry is looking for, and they benefit by having a tool that's continuously improving, continuously tailoring to their needs and benefiting them. But yeah, it's about those kind of big milestones. There's no endpoint, but there is a we've done this. So not a definition of success, but a definition of you're allowed to go to the next stage now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenon of increasing appetite as you eat. And it's okay to graduate from, a 3-course meal to a 6-course meal. But at the point you're at a 15-course meal, maybe you should break it up into, 3 different dinners. I mean,
Yep.
that's practically speaking, and having that conversation is very important, because otherwise it leads to a lot of dissatisfaction and confusion, and ultimately not as much of success. You shared some examples of folks approaching you.
Mm,
But,
mm.
there is sort of a part where you have to, either you approaching them or they approach you, but you have to discover pain points, because
Yes.
building solutions around pain points really just, leads to a much more successful, let's just call that marriage, or 3 to 6 course meal. Let's talk about food, because I really don't like comparing my partners to marriage. I'm married to the one and only man, and that's enough for me. That's plenty. Let's keep it that way. So let's keep it to 3 to 6 course meal around the pain points. How do you go around discovering the pain points?
I think this was the point of this conversation to begin with, which is we can't really start doing anything meaningful until we know what the pain points are. And with the language model sort of hype around us, there's a lot of people going, oh, we can use it for this, we can use it for that. But that's not pain point driven. That's like solution driven. So in order to find the pain points, the ones who are the best at doing it, literally anywhere in the world, is the end user. The end user knows their pain points better than anyone else. Now, because I've got a background as a lawyer, I can sort of like approximate my past experience to what possible pain points will be. And it's like throwing a dart. I'll get it on a dartboard somewhere, but I'm not going to get a bullseye. It's the end user who's going to tell us, I want to solve this. And so when I say, hey, law firms approached us to solve it, it's because they know their pain points. Now, there are firms that we talk to on a regular basis where we bring ideas to them and say, hey, does this resonate? What about this? I've heard this elsewhere in the market. Would that solve it? And even just this week, I was talking to a firm and said, I've got this really cool solution for using a large language model behind the scenes to make your lawyers more efficient. And I explained what it is. And the sort of looks on their faces as I explained it was kind of this blank look of like, I don't get it. They didn't say that, but that's what the faces said to me. And so I think as much as we on the vendor side like to bring ideas forward, it really must resonate with the users. And so like we try to facilitate these exploration conversations. We try to facilitate conversations by asking, what's the most frustrating thing in your day? Like if you could finish at 5 p.m., what's stopping you from finishing at 5 p.m.? And those discovery conversations let us find the pain points.
I love that. And I think we're encouraged to focus on food maybe as opposed to marriage. Subtle. Thank you, John, for that. Very subtle. I got it. I got the message. I can hear you. Let's talk because part of that pain point is also looking at the landscape of other solutions. Sort
Yes.
of researching that. How do you sort of combine, the landscape of what's available, what the choices are, how you can alter that landscape to make it, better?
It all comes back to what do you care about? Like, and I've been told I'm pretty unusual in this way, in that we think about the end customer first. It's always how good is the product for the end user. And the end user are a few different people. It's the lawyers themselves who's going to be using the software. It's the innovation and knowledge team who needs to show return on investment. It's the firm itself that needs to show like, yes, this was not a waste of time and money and so on. So we have to think about all of that when we think about like, do we build something or do we just buy something that already exists? The build or buy conversation is also part of a partner's conversation. And there was a conversation, and I'm going to mention names. I'm going to mention names, but not law firm names, where one of the law firms that we work with came to us and said, hey, we've got some partners who want to buy a tool called DraftWise, which is one of our competitors. And as they were explaining like why they wanted to buy DraftWise, my reaction was, go buy DraftWise. Go buy DraftWise, because these lawyers are not looking for a smart drafting solution. They're looking for DraftWise as their smart drafting solution. Don't jam something down their throat that they don't want. You want adoption, you want a win, go and buy that. Like, and we can talk about other things, but from what you're telling me, don't buy anything but what they've specifically asked for. And this is kind of like putting the customer first and saying, look, it's not about winning today. It's not about winning in a year. It's about where will the customer win, not where will the vendor win. And I think that's what we try to do.
So somewhere in that conversation, you sort of do a user journey mapping. How do you do this? What is the process? And by the way, I think your answer resonated with Cheryl. So she's here to support you. So I wanted to make sure you know that. And so thank you, Cheryl, for showing up, and thank you everyone who is actively supporting Horace on this conversation. But I do want to focus on the user journey mapping because that's an important part. Once you sort of send them to your competitors because they address that pain point, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Makes a lot of sense. I think that's a prudent way. Not only do you serve your clients, you frankly serve yourself, because why address the need that has been already addressed? There are other opportunities for these clients or others. But let's talk about user journey mapping. How do you do that?
With great difficulty. And it's because
one bite at a time, and it's a painful bite every step of the way.
It is difficult to do user journey mapping because first of all you need to get the user to give you the time to talk to you. Lawyers have really busy schedules and they don't often want to spare that time to talk to a tech vendor, a partner, or whoever it is that is trying to help them, not today, but maybe 6 months from now. So when you get that person into the room, it's about being efficient and saying, right, talk me through what you're doing and letting them tell their story and try not to interrupt them. In the back of my mind, what I do is I'm layering their stories into what I call a timeline grid. And I'm going to share a trade secret now. The timeline grid is the idea of, it's not a single timeline. It's not like, okay, step 1, then step 2, then step 3, then step 4, then step 5, but it is multiple timelines for multiple players. So it is the user themselves. Okay, they're going to do these steps, and then do they send it somewhere else? Is someone else doing steps 4 and 5, and then does it send back to the user? So when you map out that journey, what you get is you can kind of condense it down to a single timeline if you want to. You get this kind of option to say, okay, where in this multi-step journey are you having the most pain? What's causing you the biggest time costs, money costs, frustration, emotional cost? And then you identify those steps and go, now that I know maybe it's steps 1 and 3 that's causing you pain, do we replace 1 and 3? Do we bypass 1 and 3? Or do we funnel you somewhere else? And those decisions in terms of user journey mapping leads you to essentially draw out almost like a pirate map of like going to X, but you can change the path to get to X. And it's kind of like looking at, okay, friction points, how do you change it? And how much can you change it while still getting traction and adoption?
We're coming to the end. I still have a few more questions. I want to talk about the right team on your side. How
Yes.
do you, because as you alluded to, lawyers, and it's not just actually lawyers, just generally people don't necessarily want to abstract out what they do so you can build better. It's actually hard work. It's, asking a bird how the bird flies. And if the bird could talk, it would say, I do this, and the flying happening. And at some point, that's not enough to build. Like you actually need to understand a bunch of stuff of what happens to the bird. I just compared lawyers to the birds. I'm not sure if that was an insult or a compliment.
We went from food to animals, but yes, the lawyers are
I,
like birds.
I'm hoping it's an upgrade. Let's leave it at that. So, how do you put the right people on your side to have this conversation with the proverbial bird about the process of flying, or giving legal advice? I mean, same stuff, more or less.
Same things. Yeah, same things. I'm not going to extend on that analogy. So I think ultimately, like having the right team of people is about bringing together multiple experts that can communicate with each other. And to build anything good, you definitely need a domain expert. Hey, who is the lawyer? Who's the end user? Who's the one that's actually going to be playing with the tool when it's done? Does it give them the output that they want? It's almost like test-driven development, but much more kind of like domain specific. So you need that domain expert. The second person you need is a really good builder who can manipulate and use the technology to get the outcome that's necessary. And in between them, assuming those people can't really directly communicate, you need the bridge, you need the glue to translate the messages and the use cases between them. And so like those are the 3 fundamental players that I see in this equation. Who's the domain expert that's going to be using it? Who's the builder that's going to be making it? Who is the person in the middle kind of translating everything so they can communicate? Now, as you get more complicated problems, you need bigger teams because there'll be multiple aspects that you need to build or multiple pain points you have to address. But it's those 3 basic dimensions: use case, building, communicating between the 2.
Well, that's a lot of really talented people in the middle.
Yeah, I kind of brushed over that, didn't I? But like, it's really hard to translate between the 2.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I
as
think
somebody who's done it, like all of those roles one way or another, I mean, this is not like, oh yeah, it's a walk in the park. You just do some translation, No big. I mean, it's actually kind of a big deal of a job. I mean, finding the right person for any one of those three jobs. By the way, there may be more than three jobs, but let's just leave it
mm,
at three because that's complicated enough. Finding the right person for that is it's not that easy.
no, it's not easy. I was talking to Damien Real about this, and so before we talk about Damien Real, you're absolutely right. The three roles idea is a simplification, but it's a simplification to say, hey, if you want to build your own minimum viable product, those are the three people you need, and then you can build and extend on that. But back to Damien Real. So Damien and I were talking about this, and he's a litigation product expert. He's awesome. And I jokingly, not jokingly, said, Damien, I can never do what you do because I know nothing about litigation. And he said something to the effect of, well, vice versa for transactional. And it's knowing what the end user actually means and the user mapping conversation from earlier, and knowing what your technology team can actually build. That's the person in the middle. Think about them like a suspension spring between the hard ground and the car, but you're the one kind of keeping it running, because if you don't exist, the rider's going to have a really rough time. And that's the person in the middle. And it's not really a skill that comes from any course. It's just experience and listening and talking.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to reduce it to a skill, it would be around empathy, some sort of
Yeah.
way of being able to put yourself in the shoe of another, because you really don't have a shot at translation if you don't have that ability at various stages of, let's just say, those three actors' journey, but anything else as well. At some point, you have to understand when you reach the product market fit.
Yep.
How do you know you're there? How do you know you have arrived? Especially, let's contextualize it in the context of building something with using Gen AI.
Amazing question. People kind of think that you've arrived at it when there's an aha moment, like, oh my God, you've solved all my problems. But it's not like that. It's more like degrees of success. Sort of like when we're talking earlier about that endpoint, there is no endpoint, but there's sort of like the milestone to progress to the next stage. That's what we look for when we talk about how do you know when you have product market fit. You never get to perfect market fit. You always get to like improving points of like, okay, we've solved it up to like 90%, we've solved it up to 92%, and so on and so on. And it's this constant improvement cycle. And for us, the way we think about like, okay, like where do we stop? Where is enough? It's not driven by us. It's driven by the end user. They'll tell us when this is good enough, and you just keep listening. I jokingly call this building your own large language model product in 5 easy steps, and well, we didn't really cover those 5 easy steps, but let me just briefly go over them. It
Yeah,
starts
let's
with
talk about the fight. Let's
yes,
deliver on the promise. I thank you for that. I was about to tell you goodbye, but sure, go ahead. Let's do talk about the 5 easy steps that we actually advertised.
yep, 5 easy steps. Find a user who's got the pain point. What is that pain point? Really understand it. Second step, listening and user journey mapping. Really understanding what they do, what's possible, what they're looking for, what's the output. Third step is look for what's possible with the technology today. And just to address the large language model point, large language models don't solve everything. They're a component in a much bigger machine. So look for where they fit. Look for the technology you can do. Fourth step is to find the team that can build and deliver on this, and building that team, encouraging that team, keeping them together. And fifth, iterate. You're never going to get it perfect. Deliver something, get feedback, keep on improving, go back to the loop, start again. And that's the 5 steps. I don't think there's anything surprising there, hopefully.
No, I think you summed it up very well, and thank you for making sure that we're actually delivering on the promises we made. I really love that. That I go through life making few promises, but the few promises I make, I like to deliver on, and I really appreciate that you keep my lifestyle this way. That's really fantastic. Maybe final question, because
Sure.
I get a lot of questions from builders around, like, how do you build better for lawyers? How do you get along with lawyers? How do you listen? How do you empathize? How do you put yourself in the shoe of a lawyer? Because it's not an easy shoe to kind of, or comfortable shoe to put yourself into. So, how do you like, how do you know what lawyers want?
Listening and being patient. And I think it's kind of like both sides. Lawyers, historically, if you give them a new piece of technology and it doesn't work perfectly, they're going to write you off. They're not going to talk to you again for 2 years. And it's really hard to get them to give you second chances. So you have to build up enough capital, enough trust for them to go, you know what? It's not going to be perfect, but I trust you enough to have a second try. And that's listening, that's relationship building, that's humility, and saying to lawyers, I am trying my best here. I'm going to get you 80, 90% of the way. Work with me to get to 100.
I love that. This is great. Thank you, Cheryl, for the compliments, and thank you, John, for being here as well. And thank you, Horace, for delivering on the promise we made. The 5 easy steps were shared. So thank you so much. We've covered a lot of ground in this journey of building and co-designing with lawyers, and you've given some amazing tips, especially in the context of building in the Gen AI. I really appreciate it. What is one thing you want people to take away from this conversation?
I think the one thing to take away from this conversation, and everyone takes away something different, but the one thing I think might be valuable for everyone is to listen to your customers. They will tell you what they want. You just have to hear them. So keep on listening.
I love that. Keep on listening. Horace, thank you so much being part of this show. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much
Likewise.
for joining and sharing your experiences. It was amazing. And thank you everyone for participating and being part of it. I'll see you next time. Bye.
And that brings us to the end of another thrilling episode on the Notes to My Legal Self AI Insights. We had a fantastic time exploring the fascinating intersection of law and AI with you. But hold on tight, because the adventure doesn't stop here. Stay connected with us on social media to continue the conversation, share your thoughts, and be part of our incredible community of legal enthusiasts. Together, we can inspire, learn, and make a real impact on the world of law and AI. If you enjoyed today's episode, we encourage you to share it with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who could benefit from the exciting insights we discussed. Let's spread the knowledge and enthusiasm far and wide.